And the first one is the US Department of Labour has issued a long-awaited proposal on Thursday to extend mandatory overtime pay to 1 million more workers. A good move. But it was far fewer than an Obama administration rule that was struck down by a federal judge. Now, currently, salaried workers are automatically entitled to overtime pay if they earn less than $23,660 a year, and that figure was set back in 2004. And the proposal released on Thursday would raise the threshold to $35,308. And the Labour Department in 2016 doubled the salary threshold to about $47,000, extending mandatory overtime pay to about 4 million US workers. But a federal judge in Texas, no surprise, ruled the following year that the ceiling was set so high that it could sweep in some management workers who are supposed to be exempt from overtime pay protections. Now, business groups in 21 Republican-led states had sued to challenge the 2016 rule, and Labour Secretary Alexander Acosta said in a statement the proposal would bring common sense, consistency and higher wages to working Americans. Someone who won't be earning a wage anytime soon, or maybe he does even in prison, Paul Manafort, who was once served as President Trump's campaign chairman, was sentenced to nearly 4 years in prison on Thursday for cheating on taxes and bank fraud. Seems to me that's more important than skinning a child's face, but there you go. A spectacular fall for a once high-flying political consultant who told the judge he was kind of humiliated and shamed at what he'd done. And he had faced up to 24 years in prison under federal sentencing guidelines, but the US District Court Judge T.S. Ellis called the calculation excessive and sentenced him to 47 months. Mr. Ellis said the sentence he imposed was more in line with others who had been convicted on similar crimes. And he went on to say the government cannot sweep away the history of all these previous sentences for similar crimes. And Mr. Manafort's trial last year documented his career as an international lobbyist whose profligate spending habits were part of the evidence showing he cheated the Internal Revenue Service out of $6 million by hiding $16 million in income. Now, later in the week, unfortunately for Mr. Manafort, he was jailed for a further 43 months on charges stemming from the Russian investigation. And it comes a week after the 69-year-old was given a 47-month prison sentence for fraud. And the latest sentencing arises from 2 conspiracy charges which Manafort pled guilty to last year. And he told the federal court that he wanted to apologise again for his actions. But unfortunately for him, he was given a total of 73 months now, of which 30 were to run concurrently with the previous sentence of 47 months. Now, both cases stemmed from an inquiry into alleged Russian election meddling, none of which has been proven, and it's a complete waste of time, in my opinion. Now, it's near, they're talking about the 2020 elections now. This has been going on since since Trump was elected. He may get elected a second time, and they're still going on about Russian meddling. No one mentions about the 61 elections that the CIA interfered with since the Second World War. And yet Russia allegedly meddles in one, and it's all the rest are all forgotten. However, none of Manafort's charges, not surprisingly, relates to allegations of collusion with Russia. So he got thrown under the bus. People who use e-cigarettes are more likely to have heart problems, according to the latest rubbish that's written and study this week. And the rate of heart attacks amongst those who vape was 34% higher than among those who don't. Now, once corrections were made for risk factors such as age, gender, body mass index, cholesterol levels, blood pressure and tobacco use, e-cigarette users were 25% more likely to have coronary artery disease and 55% more likely to suffer from depression or anxiety. And yet they told you these were safer. Now, according to Mohinder Vindyal, he stated, until now, little has been known about cardiovascular events relative to e-cigarette use. I would suggest they don't know any more now. And these data are a real wake-up call and should prompt more action and awareness about the dangers of e-cigarettes. The report does not, however, identify a cause and effect relationship for the observation. It wouldn't, would it? Studies of people who vape are relatively new because the devices only came onto the US market in the last decade or so. Now, among US teens, the use of vaping devices rose 78% in 2018 alone, compared with the previous year. Now, e-cigarettes do not contain the cancer-causing products that are found in tobacco. According to the study, there is no cancer-causing products in natural tobacco. The carcinogen aspect is the additives that they put in the cigarettes, pure and simple. So that's how you fix it. Remove the additives and just give people who want to smoke natural tobacco. Problem solved. You would think common sense. Except common sense is rare, is it not? German Chancellor Angela Hitler has allegedly stood up to pressure from Washington as she declined a proposal by Vice President Mike Pence to send German Navy ships towards Russia's Crimea. Oh, Mr. Pence and your NATO allies. Citing anonymous sources familiar with the matter, Pence allegedly wanted German ships to sail through the Kerch Strait, which separates Crimea from mainland Russia. France, which is reportedly also encouraged to take part in a military manoeuvre off the Russian shores, refused to do it as well, calling the potential drills an unnecessary provocation. I suspect we'll hear more on that. You know, this is parts of this will be covered in From Russia with Love 4 of who these clowns really are and why they're doing it. Mr. Netanyahu next says Israel is prepared to throw the power of its naval force and urges the world to join in. Oops, there we go. America's going to join in another war to block Iranian oil shipments circumventing imposed US sanctions against Tehran. Iran is trying to bypass the sanctions on it through the covert smuggling of petroleum via the sea, according to Mr. Netanyahu. And as these attempts expand, the Navy will have a more important role in efforts to block these Iranian actions. Netanyahu said at a Navy cadets graduation ceremony in Haifa on Wednesday, but he failed to explain how exactly Israel's relatively small naval force would impose the suggested blockade against the Iranian oil tankers. Yeah, Mr. Netanyahu only spits it out, and then he gets goons in other countries to go and do it for him. Well, enough of that. But Mr. Netanyahu only emphasised that Israeli sailors are well trained and adept at carrying out sea missions against adversaries. Now the question remains is, if Israel does that, what happens if Iran decides, which is within their right, as it is their waters, remember, decide to block the Straits of Hormuz? Then all trade to that zone stops, including to Israel, including to their former gods in Egypt. You know, quite frankly, the world is sick of the violence that comes out of the country known as Israel, but it's not really anything to do with Israel or Israelites either. You know, threats of violence, bullying, human rights issues, all ignored by the UN. And personally, I would like to see Iran block the Straits of Hormuz. It's their right. You know, who cares about sanctions from rogue organisations? Because that's exactly who imposed them. It wasn't the American government. Venezuela power supply remained patchy on Friday after the worst blackout in decades. Remember a show, was it 5 or 6 weeks ago, where I said they would be cutting power off? Well, there you have it. They cut the power and paralysed most of the country, exacerbating hardship for millions of people who are already suffering from hyperinflation and widespread shortages of the basic goods. Now, power went out across the recession-stricken country on Thursday afternoon due to a alleged problem, at Venezuela's main hydroelectric plant. The government said, calling the event an act of sabotage by ideological adversaries. Very cleverly worded that. Now, power returned to some parts of the capital of Caracas during the afternoon, but quickly cut out again, according to witnesses in the local media, and threatening to extend what is already the longest blackout under 20 years of socialist leadership. Neither Socialist Party officials nor state power company Corpolec have provided further updates on the situation. We have more on Mr. Maduro and Venezuela. Let's put that in now, because this is a key move. And members of THI will smile at the words Mr. Maduro says, because it's now becoming a common theme in the alt media. Where are we? Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro has praised the armed forces for staying loyal to him and defeating a coup led by the US and the opposition leader Juan Guaido. Now, during a rally, Mr. Maduro also blamed Venezuela's widespread power cuts on cyber attacks by the opposition. Now, his remarks came during a day of protests in the country of pro-government and opposition groups. In the capital, Caracas, some supporters of Mr. Guaido scuffled with the police, and Mr. Maduro has retained the support of the military. That is a big change. I'll explain why shortly. And close allies, including Russia and China, since Mr. Guaido declared himself interim president back on January the 23rd. Now, speaking outside of the Miraflores presidential palace, Mr. Maduro referred to Mr. Guaido as a clown and a puppet of the US. Oh my. And they invited the armed forces to carry out a military coup, and their reply was quite clear. They have defeated the coup plus, as he said. Now, what's happened here, in essence, this is an intel piece, is the generals who were being pressured into taking Mr. Maduro out Essentially, the generals were told Mr. Majuro was blocking the RV, of which they're sitting there with all the dinars, zims and dongs and all the other fake currencies. And Majuro was blocking it. This came from the clowns in the US military, who was backing Mr. Guaido. Now the generals have learnt the truth of what's been going on and have decided to turn and support Mr. Majuro. Now they know who is really involved, and it's no coincidence he used the term clown. So I'm hoping, from my perspective, and I did say my, that this leads to generals in other countries around the world who are being promised all kinds of billionaire, millionaire and trillionaire status with fake bits of paper will also see through the truth like the generals in Venezuela have and turn on these clowns. There's funds available once these clowns are gone. We all know that now. You all know that now. Maybe even in this country. Probably be the last one. But there's sufficient countries around the world. Argentina is another. Many in Africa. Generals sitting on all kinds of money deals that will never materialise. And they've been lied to left, right and centre by the control system. Well, kudos to the generals in Venezuela. They've heard the truth and they've accepted it and ran with it. Let's hope many other countries and their militaries follow their lead. Next, US traitor. Well, no, not US traitor, American traitor. He's a subsidiary of the US military, Erik Prince, stated as the former head of Blackwater. Yeah, because they've got that many other companies now, Frontier Services, Z, Academy, etc., etc. And the brother of Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, who would never have got that job otherwise, she's completely incompetent, has acknowledged that he was present at a key 2016 Trump Tower meeting. In an interview he gave this week to Al Jazeera, Prince said he was present at an August 3rd, 2016 meeting at Trump Tower to talk about Iran policy. And the New York Times reported last year that Prince organised a 2016 meeting at Trump Tower that included Donald Trump Jr. and Lebanese-American businessman George Nader. Now, during that meeting, Nader reportedly said that the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia wanted to aid Trump in his bid for the White House. Prince previously testified under oath to the House Intelligence Committee in November of 2017, saying at the time he had no official or really unofficial role in the Trump campaign and his only involvement in helping was attending fundraisers and placing yard signs. Now, the host, Mehdi Hassan, pressed Prince on why his presence at the meeting was apparently not part of his testimony to lawmakers, to which Prince suggested that they got the wrong transcript, which prompted laughter from the audience. Not quite, Mr. Prince. Prince later added that not all of the discussion that day was transcribed, and his latest comments come as he and Nader have both been asked to cooperate in the House Judiciary Committee's expansive probe for possible abuse of power, obstruction of justice and corruption by Trump and his allies. Prince said last year he'd been cooperating with Special Counsel Robert Mueller's team, which is investigating, as we all know, possible collusion with the Russians, which never ever took place. And Mueller's team had reportedly probed several 2017 meetings that occurred in the Seychelles during the period Prince met with a Russian banker there. Well, Prince has acknowledged that he travelled to the Seychelles and that he met with a Russian government official while he was there, but has denied he was acting on behalf of the Trump administration. Mr. Prince, the man who couldn't hack it, being in the US Navy, he was accepted as in the United States Naval Academy and attended it for 3 semesters before leaving, citing he loved the Navy but disliked the Academy. Except other sources say Mr. Prince dropped out of the Naval Academy. Yeah, because he can make more money ripping governments off all around the world with their death and destruction policy. The Senate yesterday rebuked Mr. Trump for his continued defence of Saudi Arabia after the killing of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi, and voted for the second time to end American military assistance for the kingdom's war in Yemen and to curtail presidential war powers. A good move for me. And the 54-46 vote condemning a nearly 4-year conflict in Yemen that has killed thousands of civilians and inflicted a devastating famine, and sets the foundation for what could become Trump's first presidential veto, with the House expected to overwhelmingly pass the measure, possibly as early as this month. Now, the vote may also be the opening salvo in a week where Senate Republicans have the opportunity to hit back the president's aggressive use of executive power. The chamber will vote on a resolution that would overturn Mr. Trump's declaration of a national emergency to secure funding for his border wall, which they did. From Russia with Love 3 will explain Yemen and Saudi Arabia a lot easier. A 4-hour we're off to the UK now. Whilst it may be free at point of source, British people pay a national insurance of 12 or 13% out of their wages to pay for healthcare and benefits, etc. But the waiting times are to attend the hospital, both on the day and for treatment or an operation, is beyond a joke over there. Now, the 4-hour A&E target, which is like triage in America, they get 4 hours to look at them, may be dropped under plans announced by the NHS in England. The NHS bosses have unveiled plans for an overhaul of the accident and emergency target, alongside changes for waiting times for cancer, mental health and also planned operations. It said the targets were becoming outdated, but it comes after many of them, those targets, 4 hours to be seen, have been missed for most of the last few years. So in other words, more people are waiting more than 4 hours to be seen. And instead of aiming to see and treat virtually all A&E patients in 4 hours, the sickest patients will be prioritised for quick treatment, which they already are, in most cases anyway. And the NHS in England wants to see patients coming in with heart attacks, I'm sure they do, acute asthma, sepsis and stroke, starting their care within an hour. And the changes will be piloted this year, and if successful, could be introduced next year. Now, the plans have been unveiled after the NHS was asked by the Prime Minister to look at the system of targets last year. And the 4-hour target for accidents and emergency, which expects 95% of patients to be seen in that time, was introduced back in 2004, has not been met since July of 2015. Last month, only 2 hospital trusts hit the 4-hour 95% patients. And the NHS said the current target seemed to be distorting priorities, and it pointed out that a large number of patients were admitted into hospital just before the 4-hour mark, which has the effect of stopping the clock. Terrible. Britain, another country who spends far too much on military and spying and not enough on people and health. We'll have more about that later. Two more before we get into some Q&A. The boss of Ethiopian Airlines has called for the grounding of all Boeing's 737 MAX 8 aircraft until it's established they are safe to fly. This is following 2 crashes. Now, many countries have already suspended the plane after one of the airline's jets crashed last Sunday, minutes after takeoff, which killed all 157 people on board, most of them connected to the UN. Well, that's one of the stories I forgot to catch up on. Now, Teowold Gebriam told the BBC that although the exact causes were still unknown, there were similarities to a Lion air crash last October in Indonesia, if memory serves me correct. But officials say that the jet is, US officials say the jet is safe. Yeah. And the FAA said the review had showed no systemic performance issues and there was no basis for grounding the aircraft. Now, regulators, including across the European Union, Hong Kong, Singapore, China and Australia, have all banned 737 MAX aircraft from flying in or over their airspace. And those authorities must have good reason to ground the aircraft, according to Mr. Teowold, adding that safety is paramount and grounding is the right thing to do. Now, meanwhile, a number of US politicians have called on the FAA to temporarily ground a Boeing model until their safety is confirmed, but the FAA said other civil aviation authorities had not provided data to us that would warrant action. Boeing confirmed that it had been, listen to this closely, Boeing confirmed that it had been developing a flight control software enhancement for the aircraft, but it said it was confident they were safe to fly. The Association of Flight Attendants CWA union said the 737 MAX fleet should be grounded out of an abundance of caution, and the Allied Pilots Association said members who had safety concerns would not be forced to fly. Now, Southwest Airlines and American Airlines, both major operators of the Boeing 737 MAX, were continuing to use the planes until yesterday. The United States bowed down to pressure from pretty much everywhere else and grounded Boeing's 737 MAX jets, citing new satellite data and evidence from the scene of Sunday's crash of an Ethiopian Airlines that killed 157 people. And this is the second time that the US Federal Aviation Administration had halted flights of a Boeing plane in the last 6 years. It had grounded the 787 Dreamliner back in 2013 because of problems with smoking batteries. Final news item. I have a piece on this, but I would suggest it is possible to take all this with a pinch of salt at the moment. But this was put out on Monday. Trump sent Congress on Monday a record $4.75 trillion budget request that proposes an increase in military spending and sharp cuts to domestic programs like education and environmental protection, and also Medicaid and Social Security for the 2020 fiscal year. Now, Mr. Trump's budget, the largest in federal history, it's about 3 to 4 times the normal budget, includes a nearly 5% increase in military spending, oh dear, which is more than the Pentagon had asked for, and an additional $8.6 billion for construction of the border wall with Mexico. And White House officials said the budget would include a total of $1.9 trillion in cuts to mandatory safety net programs like Medicaid. It also proposes new work requirements for working-age adults, recipients of supplemental nutrition assistance, federal housing support and Medicaid. A move that the administration said would reduce spending on those programs by $327 billion. From what I gathered, they're proposing that you have to look for work, apply for work, or do something for 20 hours per week to qualify for that assistance. Now, the President is asking for a 5% cut in non-defence discretionary spending compared to 2019 spending caps that were set by Congress. That would amount to almost $100 billion less than Congress actually spent on non-defence discretionary programs in 2019 when it busted those caps. Those cuts would not be across the board but come from programs at federal agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency, where Mr. Trump had previously suggested cutting funds. And the budget would also reduce spending on foreign aid, except to one country, international cultural exchange programs and federal employee retirement plans. I'll have more on that later.